technology are identified and they can be translated into long-term, real and scalable solutions. That's my quick take, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Sriram.
To add to further what Sanjay sir said, so there are quite a lot of things that if I am talking about ecosystem, would like to add to this list. So like for example, you require an active role of media, because until unless you have an active role of media, how would investors get to know that which startup is good, or how would customer get to know that which startup is good? We would also like to have institutions like World Trade Center, TIE, NASSCOM, so on and so forth, to have more set of events wherein startups, they get visibility, they get the network, because it's all the network play. As one of my professors used to say, that your network is your net worth. So we need to network more. That is what startups require more and more. Further, we would require more and more research institutions like RICH, NASA, so on and so forth, so that they can solve or they can share in their researches with the startups, so that startup, they really get in the value product, but also bring in a wonderful valuation. So bringing that into the ecosystem, how do we do that? Further, we see that government has been talking about a lot of incubation centers being mandatories and all higher education institutions. Furthermore, we would require that how do we really handle and manage the first-time entrepreneurs, what we need to train them. So those are for certain few more things that we really need to think about from an ecosystem perspective that needs to come in. Further, what I would say last but not the least, but the most important factor is how do I think from a policy perspective, which is really going to change. Now, the elements that we and Sanjay spoke about right now, about these are the elements that the startup ecosystem requires. But from the perspective you see that I bring one more angle, that India being a country for one of the ancient countries talking about GDPs contributing big time. But what is stopping us from a policy perspective to think that I am going to give you tax benefits to startups which are actually talking products? Now that changes the mindset. That will bring us far more faster to reach that #1 position in 2047. When I really talk about why not to give tax incentives to the people who are trying to really do something very, very new and try to do. So people will start thinking more products. Now that can only happen when a policy comes in that perspective. So lots of potential. Next 20 years, next 100 years, India is certainly going to dominate. I certainly have this gut feeling that we are trying to say that, being productive to say that we are going to be world #2 economy. I feel if we think right from policy perspective, which is more encouraging, I'm sure 2047 will be a new year of 100 years wherein we will be world #1 GDP.
Thank you, Sriram. We started with startups and funding, ecosystem, policy. Now let us go back and see how actually deep technology is being adopted. So Ram, I want you to comment on how enterprises, businesses or governments are using the deep technology. What is the demand coming from the industry? Then we can move to a use case, how a vertical looks at deep technology.
Sure. I think especially in India right now, the way technology adoption is moving, right? And especially given that government has enabled some of the digital public goods, I think that is driving adoption in India very fast. The other piece which is very important here is, while the startup ecosystem is, I would say, the fuel in that engine, there is a strong governance also required on top of that to make sure that these are the tools. And I remember in earlier days, there was a saying that it's like any technology is like a torch, right? If you give it in the hands of right people, they will really scale the civilization to next level. But if it goes in wrong hands, then obviously it can really cause some disastrous impact. And that governance is very important. I think the adoption is really driven by the reach in the market. Now most of the technologies, be it mobile phones, be it broadband, everything is available to the citizens in the remotest place in India. And that is actually triggering a lot of new use cases. And that ultimately triggers the excitement in the startups and then that builds the whole ecosystem. Now, the governance part of that also is very important, and that's where some of the organizations like, the big fours, right? They play very accountable role, I would say. Not only responsible, but they hold the accountability to bring that governance to people and make sure that they work very closely with leaders like you, sir, as well as the industry academia and others to make sure that the adoption is sustainable adoption. And it's not just a spike we see and then it actually goes other way, right? So that's my take.
Thank you. Satish, how do you see as a user segment in the logistics industry, how deep technology is perceived? What is the level of usage of technology for business purposes? What is your requirement from deep technologies?
So I think to just set the context more in terms of deep technology and the startups and the rest of them, logistics undoubtedly is the oldest profession. Probably prostitution was considered as the oldest profession and then the logistics came into it. But as far as technology is concerned and its adoption is concerned, you are not even at a 1% or a 2% really in terms of everyone using it. Probably Amazon is one case of a solid deep technology used. But if you look at today, if you look at a basic fundamental in logistics, you almost do 17 times a data entry before a shipment moves from a point A to a final point B in the other part of the world. Now, if you have technology, you should not be entering data 17 times because it's criminal in that sort of it. A fundamental thing that has happened over the years is that logistics companies have tried to build their own technology, but 99% of them, after burning millions of dollars, have not been able to build the technology and have failed. So there are a few set of people who give you a technology which is there. The tech company